Hey everyone, today I'm here with Dr. Christina Liaghati. She is currently the lead at MITRE ATLAS, the trustworthy and secure AI department manager there as well, and has been working with NATO on securing AI enabled systems. Probably a bunch of other stuff. You've got a lot of hats. Christina, thank you for taking the time, and it's great to have you.
Thanks, Kirk. It's a pleasure to be on.
So as I said, you have a bunch of different stuff you're doing. First one I want to talk about is just kind of give people a background. Most people that are watching are probably familiar with MITRE, but may not be familiar with Project Atlas specifically. So could you tell me a little bit about what is MITRE? What is Project Atlas?
Yeah, definitely. So, MITRE is a not for profit, and we are a fairly large one. It's about a 10,000 person organization, and we work across just about every domain in the federal government as we support our government sponsors in kind of all the different consequential mission spaces that they operate in. In that model, as a not for profit, we primarily operate FFRDCs, which are federally funded research and development centers that really put us in a much more trusted advisor, like hand in hand role with a lot of those different government sponsors, which means that a lot of my team, right? Like I lead a 50-person department in addition to Atlas, and like all of my staff at any given moment are working across different projects for the IRS, Health and Human Services, the defense side of the government, right? Like in the same day or the same week, right? As they're like bringing their AI skills and especially like trustworthy and AI skill set to bear in those different sponsor environments. So it's a pretty cool spot. We get to work across a lot of different technical problems, kind of prototyping different ideas, innovating for different things that'll ultimately solve an end goal problem or an impactful problem that a sponsor is trying to solve.
Okay, and so it sounds like one of the things is going to be informing on like policy,
Mhm.
helping these organizations decide what those policies are and why and all that. But does is MITRE also doing, or under Project Atlas, are you also doing like technical research, like actually doing like lab research as well?
Yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of like the range of what we do across MITRE, absolutely. There's a whole lot of additional kind of policy components, everything from like higher level policy, working with different staffers and folks on the Hill to, hey, we've got like this individual office that's been stood up inside of the DoD, and they want to start working through some of the challenges that are kind of the focus, the charter, the mission of that office, right? And then we'll get in and kind of be boots on the ground in that environment and help them figure it out at a much lower working level, right? So it's definitely like a range of spaces. We also do kind of research and development and a lot of the like even potential prototyping on the research side of things for those different sponsors as well. Kind of MITRE, historically, as it's existed for the last 50 plus years, has been primarily like a systems engineering type mindset across the company, right? Like even though like we have a huge number of staff members outside of like systems engineering disciplines, we all kind of think about, especially in like the trustworthy and secure AI mindset, we're thinking about assuring not just the AI models themselves, but the larger system of systems perspective and kind of like how these AI enabled systems are going to operate as a larger consequential mission environment, right? Like what your human in the loop interacting with that system looks like. That's the whole kind of general perspective that we take when whether it's helping sponsors think through the policy, the risk, the impact of some of these systems, or helping them actually get into kind of the technical understanding of whether or not an individual technical solution is going to be right for their ultimate end goal or their ultimate problem. Once you kind of think about it as like one of the pieces you're integrating into a greater whole. That's been a lot of the same focus that we've had under Atlas as well. Atlas has been our big community collaboration over the last 5 years with a lot of the different industry and government partners that have really started to see and focus more on what these new AI security vulnerabilities look like and what they could do to their systems as they're operating in an environment where they might be maliciously attacked or taken advantage of, right, by different individuals that, of course, might see a benefit or have an incentive to attack some of these very consequential systems. And that's everything from finance to healthcare to defense to like even just undermining the U.S. supply chain or the IT development sector, right? Like stealing IP from industry is not something that we want to happen, right? Even if it doesn't happen like an immediate like human life that's getting impacted. So we've been collaborating with a lot of that community to just bring everybody's awareness up to at least a minimum shared bar as we try to ground the real threat landscape that's evolving pretty rapidly around AI and AI security right now.
So pretty broad mission.
Yeah,
it's
a lot going on.
it's like, yeah, I mean, you're like, oh, let's just solve AI security. No, I mean, it's amazing, and I'm a huge fan of Project Atlas. I mean, I'm a huge fan of MITRE as well and Attack and everything. But I think Project Atlas right now, from my perspective, is the standard for AI security. I see everybody else kind of behind. And I think that from what I've seen so far, that your organization has matured in this space, I think, much faster than everybody else. So just wanted to mention that as well. I think that Project Atlas brings a level of maturity that we're trying to hoping to see push out across the industry, right, and kind of raise the bar. So that's awesome. I want to ask you about a bunch of those integrations and especially some of the stuff I've seen articles about recently. But I want to first, before I get carried away with what I want to find out, um, I want to step back and kind of find out more about, you know, how you got here. You obviously, like I said, you have a bunch of different hats. You're informing policy at a national, international level. And obviously you could have done a lot of different stuff, but you chose tech and AI and I just am curious, where did that interest originate? Why tech? Why AI? And kind of, when did you decide like this is actually also going to be my career?
Yeah, definitely. It has been a long and winding road. I will say that. I started out getting my bachelor's and master's in physics many years ago, and first started working with Raytheon as a radar engineer. Right, so like I definitely have come a long way since then. And to be honest, the whole way that I've been able to do that is because of kind of how MITRE is set up and what the MITRE model is like. Right, like I actually started with MITRE down in Huntsville, Alabama, at our site down there, originally supporting some of the different defense work going on in that space, like grown out of the primarily radar focused work that I had been doing at Raytheon prior to that. And as I started to get to know MITRE a little bit better, I started to kind of see how many different things I could touch, right? Like, and right,
Mm,
start to get more involved in, understand better, right? Like I could always find new problems that I could really dive into and get excited about. And having the opportunity to really grow myself and my own technical skill set and exposure, right? Like I did my PhD while working full time for MITRE, and MITRE paid for it. And got
nice.
that PhD in systems engineering, right? Like right out the gate, like pretty early into joining MITRE. And in that PhD, I had a machine learning class, and it started to expose me a little bit more to some of these different areas, even beyond the physics and engineering world that I had touched already. Which actually kind of led to some of my continual working across the organization and finding new problems that I felt like I could really have an impact on. And that led to our internal research and development program, which is where I started working alongside our lead for the internal research and development program that really oversaw a lot of the AI IRAD inside of MITRE. And that meant that I got exposed to just about every innovative AI project that was going on inside of the company, which like I just absolutely latched onto, right? Like I fell in love with it. And that was 6 years ago now, 5, 6 years ago now. And it's kind of wild, like just how much I got sucked into the vortex. And that was like so long before the chat GPT thing. So like having
Yeah.
watched the world evolve around this topic as I've devoted more and more of my time and energy to it. when we first started Atlas, right? Like I was there and kind of working alongside our IRAD development lead as we kind of started to formulate that idea 5 years ago, and it's just been kind of wild to see how much we've been able to do in this space, especially as more of the AI community has really adopted and started. The community itself has grown, and even more organizations are adopting and implementing AI, which means that a lot more of those attack surfaces are evolving around us pretty quickly as well. And the amount that we can do with the community to increase the security of those, right? Like I mentioned earlier, kind of bring that whole baseline understanding of AI security up, and ultimately support a lot of our different government sponsors in mitigating these risks, is that they're looking to kind of use AI, right? Like take advantage of that value of AI in their really impactful operational mission environments as well. So it's been a wild ride. I really love just how many problems I've gotten to kind of dive into over the years, and um, being able to kind of explore those different challenges, right? Like see a problem on the horizon that I can see becoming a bigger thing, and being able to like just throw my time and energy into it has really led to me now managing a department of about 50 folks that are working across this exact space along with me, and leading Atlas as we engage with a lot of the external community members on the exact same topic. So it's been a wild ride. I never could have planned, right, this career path in any in any universe, right? But just being able to kind of see those different opportunities for impact in front of me and throwing myself at it has been a lot of the path in getting here.
So one of the things that you said during that was you started to get pulled into all this at MITRE AI focus, before ChatGPT
Yeah.
came out, was public, right? So I'm very curious. Um, before ChatGPT came out, and I think it's fair to say that the space has changed radically since then. Whether or not um, it was a catalyst, right? But so I'm curious though, in your situation when you were involved with this stuff at MITRE, before that, did you kind of did you think that there was going to be this sort of new focus on AI? Did you foresee kind of this scramble for everybody to integrate AI quickly and understand the risks all of a sudden, or did it seem like something that was going to be kind of more of a slow trickle?
Yeah, we've definitely seen the power of some of these tools for a while, as like the science and tech
Right.
community, right? Like anybody that had been working in
Yeah.
this space over the last 20 or 30 years knew that they were powerful tools, but I don't think anybody could have predicted quite the crazy exponential spike that ChatGPT, right? Like even
Okay.
OpenAI didn't anticipate it, right? So anybody that says otherwise, I'm like,
Got
hindsight,
it.
right? It's definitely one of those things to where like we've deliberately prioritized inside here. I mean, we've had people inside of MITRE working in the AI space for the last 30 years. And I mean, like we've been, even on the AI security side, we've been red teaming government systems and working through these AI security challenges for the last 10 plus years, right? So like
Okay.
the topic itself isn't new for us, but I think the fact that the whole space has accelerated as rapidly as it has over the last couple of years, it's crazy. Like it was just 2 years ago, right? Like it's just
Yeah.
crazy how much the
Yeah.
environment has changed in
It's
the last
changed a
few
lot.
years.
Just the conversation has changed a lot
Right.
too,
Exactly.
right?
The
That's
energy.
maybe the biggest. Yeah, that's maybe the biggest difference that I
Yeah.
think ChatGPT's public release had on the space was just the generation of that conversation. Um, okay, so yeah, I was curious about that, and then it sounded like MITRE really enabled you in a lot of ways to grow in your career and find something you love and be successful. And I love hearing that because it's not always the case in the commercial private sector, right? Where I'm you know I'm just saying, like, if sometimes if you're at a job and you do your job really well, there's not necessarily incentive to provide you with opportunities to move out of that job. Maybe there's incentives to keep things going the way they are, right? And so it can be difficult sometimes, I think, people in the security space to get those opportunities. when they're in a situation like that where maybe they're seen as critical to a specific team or a function or a service, everything's going smoothly. So we don't want that person to move around, right? It happens. Now, I will say that I believe that you can overcome that as an individual within the space. Um, might require doing a lot of things on the side in your off time, and studying and learning and growing yourself. So I don't personally make excuses like that typically, but I do think that there's a broader. I mean, it does happen, right? It's not always like people are not always encouraged to try new things and grow within their role. So I love hearing that MITRE um, is doing that. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
One of the other things I wanted to ask you about in kind of that same role is I saw this article about you integrating, well, helping out NATO, standing up a team to interface with NATO. And that, I mean, obviously it caught my eye. It's like NATO, boom, like, big deal. So that really caught my eye, and I read through that. And I'm just curious if you could tell us some about what that looks like and what specifically you're actually like assisting them with. I know I read in the article is like AI, autonomous security and stuff, but it seemed like it was specific to um, helping them understand and protect these AI enabled systems,
Mhm.
which to me sounded like a focus on surrounding systems as well, not just the model, right?
Right.
So if you could maybe tell us a little bit about that, give us some more detail, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, definitely. And this all kind of ties back to what I mentioned earlier with the whole system of systems approach, right? Like MITRE being like an organization at its core that like tries to kind of think about things at that more strategic level, right? Like it doesn't mean that we don't have like a lot of really deep technical folks that are working on solving individual technical pieces of the problem, but that whole kind of system of systems approach and like seeing the value and necessity of figuring out those kind of integration pieces is what has led to a lot of our international community collaboration around AI security, AI assurance, and these broader set of kind of rapidly evolving challenge areas. Ultimately, the exploratory team that NATO proved 2 years ago now, right before ChatGPT came out, funnily enough,
Yeah.
right? So it was like even NATO, right, was understanding as we were having these conversations with them that this was enough of a thing that they wanted to go ahead and approve, and like they voted to approve this exploratory team focused on AI security that we were going to build out around Atlas. And through that 1 year execution of that exploratory team, especially as the whole ChatGPT explosion changed the conversation, right? Like more and more countries, both government organizations and industry organizations from those countries got more involved, right? Like as they heard more about, oh, hey, this AI security and assurance exploratory team is kind of talking through some of the things that I was concerned about as I was thinking about some of the power of these tools. So they've gotten more and more involved. And in the fall of last year, so 1 year after the start of the exploratory team, they voted to mature that into a full up research task group. So I chaired the exploratory team, and I've been chairing the research task group now as well. That's like a 3 year dedicated effort with
Wow.
all these different countries and organizations involved for us to deliberately work together to try to like not only share any of the existing tools, best practices, things that the community has developed from across all these different countries, but also to deliberately work together on standardizing and bringing some of those best practices and tools together to create not only the kind of initial understanding of what this AI assurance challenge landscape looks like, but also the recommendations for assured AI use, doing a deeper dive into the AI security area in particular, because we know that that's going to be a particularly concerning element of assurance on the larger NATO mission environment, right? Like you're by definition going to be operating in potentially malicious environments with a lot of those impactful AI enabled systems. So focusing on the security component has been pretty big for us, and then also just convening and gathering more of the community around this exact conversation because just making more folks across the NATO community aware that these are risks that they need to be thinking about and considering before they're deploying AI enabled systems in their operational environments. And also giving them a little bit more like easy access to some of the things that they can use to mitigate some of those risks. And that is leading to our at the same time the NATO bodies voted to make the symposium topic for next year AI security and assurance, and that's kind of halfway through our research task group. So for about a
Wow.
week here at MITRE in the US and in the McLean, Virginia area, we're going to be hosting the entire community in person for a week long symposium to talk to it as well. So yeah, the overarching NATO research task group being grown out of the original Atlas kind of community model has just been one of the additional mechanisms. And like overall, it's like actually a pretty small portion of my time, given how many things are like going on around this space. So it's just kind of wild how much we've been able to do with like monthly meetings, right? Like this isn't even something where we're like doing
Right.
on a daily basis, but it's been enough kind of traction, energy, and momentum from across the international community that I am encouraged that we're making progress here and helping to bring more folks up to speed and ultimately mitigate some of these risks.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. I mean, first of all, amazing. That's sounds like an incredible initiative, and that there's been, a lot of success. So, first of all, that's amazing. Um, but also, it makes me hopeful, like in a lot of ways, optimistic, because a lot of times, especially with tech, there's this feeling that government officials, people in place in government, don't understand the tech that they're
Mhm.
supposed to form policy around, and they don't even understand like the questions to ask. Like if you remember, they when we saw a lot of tech leaders questioned at
Mhm.
the Capitol, a lot of the questions that they were asking, like some of them didn't make sense, or you're just kind of like, what does that have to do with anything? So I mean, so people get a feeling like, oh, these people who are supposed to make these important decisions about tech don't even understand the tech, and so there can be a feeling that like the government or government agencies are disconnected from maybe the private
Mm.
sector's understanding of tech. But that makes me very optimistic if
Yeah.
NATO saw this, prioritized this years ago, and you have all this participation that you're talking about, and they're dedicating all this time to it. You said next year with the symposium. That makes me optimistic that okay, they're paying attention to this issue, and they're obviously serious about it. So I like hearing that. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's very encouraging. And I'll say, like,
Yeah.
even on the US side, right? Like I mentioned, we've been red teaming different government systems for over 10 years now. I think definitely we are getting increased traction and like seeing more interest in the topic space as more and more government agencies, departments, organizations not only are trying to kind of think through the challenges of implementing and adopting AI-enabled systems, but also trying to kind of think through what they need to consider on the risk side before they do that. And that's been where we've seen a lot of the growth in different organizations inside of the US government as well, kind of thinking through some of these challenges. But I mean, like when we first created Atlas 5 years ago, that was at like with the direct engagement and involvement and shaping from some of our different sponsors and the DoD and Intel community side. So it's definitely been something that at least different pockets of the government have been heavily understanding and prioritizing for a while now. So just being able to get more of those resources and things that different community members have been prioritizing for a while into the hands of more community members, right? Like, a new element of healthcare, right? Like, is suddenly focusing on this topic. They're not starting from scratch, right? Like the different collaborative
Right.
organizations from across all these different government sectors, nationally and internationally, are very determined to try and get everybody jump started as much as we can. So it's been really encouraging to see that kind of engagement and energy. And I mean, like even just the number of industry organizations involved in Atlas. We started with like about 12 when we first built out the matrix 5 years ago. There's now over 150 organizations involved across all of our different lines of
Wow.
effort, whether that's the matrix itself, the case studies behind it, mitigations, the AI incident sharing initiative that we just launched a couple of weeks ago, and then things like the AI risk database to capture more of the vulnerability side. So it's a pretty cool and evolving, very encouraging, right, landscape that we're getting to kind of see and help be a part of right now.
Yeah, I mean that's all incredible. It's awesome that you're getting so much participation. And you mentioned a couple resources from lighter websites. So I wanted to mention I am going to be putting a list of references out that you provided. along with this episode, and just wanted to highlight. I'm not going to bring them up right now, but just want to highlight some of the stuff that you sent me um, already. And you referenced the incident sharing portion. There's also there's the case studies that I found to be really great. I think that's like I highly encourage anyone who sees this who's interested in space to go and read those case studies because they're they're a good signal. It's not it's not noise or something that you shouldn't be concerned about or something that's been hyped or something. It's a real it's a real threat, real scenario, has real impact. So I really like that. And again, there's several things here that you sent me about. We've got one about AI supply chain risks. Obviously there's Project Atlas. Definitely, everybody take a look at the full matrix for that. It's very impressive. And the things we were talking about with NATO. So I'll be sharing those along with this. But is there anything you wanted to highlight there from those items that you sent?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest thing is people's opportunities to get involved, right? Like that's been the biggest thing. And right, like even just kind of talking through our excitement about how much the space has evolved, it wouldn't have evolved without the kind of continuous engagement and contributions from the community members. Like uh, me sitting in a closet somewhere is not going to come up with Atlas or all this stuff coming up around it, right? Like Atlas would not exist without the incredible community of engaged contributors around it. So I'd say absolutely, as folks are coming up to speed and looking through some of the resources, especially that you're going to be kind enough to share. Think about what you want to get involved in, like whether that's the NATO Research Task Group, any person that's a citizen of a NATO country or a enhanced opportunity partner of NATO can participate in those research task group elements. If you want to get involved in the maturation of the like actual Atlas matrix, we are taking case study submissions all the time. Same thing on the mitigation side, right? Like even on the public facing website there, we have a case study builder. So it makes it a little easier for folks to send things to us if they think that there's
Nice.
a new type of tactic or technique that they've seen in the wild that we aren't like currently capturing in the matrix. Same thing for the incident sharing and risk database elements as we kind of started Atlas 5 years ago and modeled it after attack, right? To capture these new tactics and techniques. We deliberately wanted to keep that to the smallest number of case studies possible to make it easier for folks to come up to speed on what those new attacks look like, and kind of how those unique tactics and techniques present themselves. But we know that, and I have been like continually hearing from the community from the last 2 years that folks need a little bit more data to be able to do that kind of data driven risk analysis, right? Like more of that threat intel analysis that they're accustomed to doing in the cyber world to really narrow in on the exact kinds of things that they want to be focusing on as they're prioritizing certain mitigations inside of the development of their tools and environments where they're building and deploying AI enabled systems. And that's what led to the AI incident sharing effort. So that's a fully public website now that folks can immediately jump into and share incidents with us that we will work with them to then appropriately anonymize and then push back out to a trusted community of collaborators. So that's where we're deliberately working with the community to bring some of the data out of those silos, right? Like each organization has data from their perspective in their environment, but we're working with them to capture that through that incident sharing initiative, and then after the anonymization process, right, the sanitization process, push that back out to the community so they have more of those technical elements that they need to be able to kind of analyze and filter through, so they know what in their systems they need to be mitigating first. So yeah, definitely a lot going on around all of that. The most recent launches and releases, and then AI risk database, which you mentioned earlier with the AI risk supply chain article, is the next big thing as we start to tackle more of the vulnerability side. Right, that's the proactive vulnerability discover, whereas incident sharing is a little bit more reactive to something that's already happened.
Got it. Right. Okay. Yeah, that those are all great resources. And you know, it's coincidental timing, but something that has come up recently in the red team community space is, concern that often when we see media articles or things kind of informally reported, a lot of the um, issues that are described are maybe um, they're not things that the red team community perceives to be legitimate threats, right? And so, a couple examples. Recently, there was an article talking about how OpenAI had identified these uh, threat groups. I don't remember if they specified if they were nation state supported. I would guess not by the maturity of what I saw, but these actor groups, threat actor groups, that were using it to generate scripts, generate social media profiles in a different language, right? I don't recall if this example was in that article, but another classic example is like it helps write more sophisticated phishing emails. Like a lot of this stuff is what keeps finding its way through these articles to like the red team community. And um, it- you know, first I just want to say when I look at Project Atlas, it doesn't look like that at all. It seems like you have a much more grounded take on what the threats are and why, right? It makes more sense to me, but it's frustrating for me as someone in the red team space. I've been pushing for a few years now, within the red team community to get people interested in AI security, and it's difficult because of this, right? Because a lot of what the red team community sees is these articles that come out, and they go, well, this is laughable. This is like
Right.
calling Google a threat because you can search for things on Google, right? That's the comparison. Or like calling, Duolingo is a threat because it helps translate language. Like it's understandable why the red team community kind of scoffs at this stuff. Um, but I think there's a huge disconnect between the things you've been talking about, the things that MITRE is doing in the space and trying to inform people about, versus what I've been seeing for the last 2 years, basically since ChatGPT's release, in terms of the what the threats are, right? The threat modeling side of things. You know, is that? I guess could you just maybe explain the difference in like why this is happening, where what tends to find its way into popular media and make it onto these community spaces is this kind of stuff that maybe isn't super valid, but then you have the work that Project Atlas is doing, which I think is right on point. So what do you
Yeah.
think the disconnect is there?
I think a lot of this ultimately just gets traced back to the hype cycle and folks not really having the good grounding or understanding of what AI enabled systems are capable of, right? So folks, especially that might not have been in the science and tech community until more recently or something, right? Like, or they're just not even in the science and tech community, and they're just one of those kind of more adopters or implementers. Which I mean, not to look down on that at all. It's more like
Yeah,
that they just might not have the grounding or historical perspective on what these systems might be good at, or what they, where they might not be actually better than the humans in the loop, right? Like that's the other piece. If you don't have a good understanding of what like actual cybersecurity operational specialists could actually do in this space, maybe that looks impressive, right? But
yeah,
I think it's ultimately kind of traced back to some of these kinds of exciting ideas for things you can do with large language models or even Gen AI enabled tools in general here, right? Like we've kind of seen multiple fields go through this exact same thought process of, oh my gosh, like these things are going to make my job obsolete in 5 minutes. And, like I
right.
don't really know what to do, or like I'm anti AI now or something, right? Like it's just like there was a weird set of cycles going on there, especially about the first year, where folks were originally kind of afraid or not understanding the tools very well.
Yeah,
And I think as we've slowly peeled back the layers of, hey, like, look, no, there really needs to be a human in the loop making the decisions. These are augmentation tools, right? Like they're really here to help make you better at your job, right? Like they're not going to immediately replace you or anything like that. And yeah, jobs might change, but I really don't think that it's quite going to be quite to that level of the hype concern that I think has just gotten people's attention. So One of the different ways that we've actually been like deliberately focusing on helping sponsors understand how these tools are useful, whether that's in the AI for cyber environment, um, and working with the community to make sure that like our perspective on what's like grounded and achievable here. We have different research and development projects that are deliberately focused on actually evaluating large language models for effectiveness at some of these like operational cyber use cases. And in some cases, they perform pretty well as a augmenting tool, right, to like help a more traditional cyber expert understand and operate in that environment more effectively. But I don't think we're immediately going to see like a bunch of autonomous agents just running around and policing your network in 5 minutes, right? Like, yeah, I think the game is definitely accelerating in that direction, and we will see some elements of the cyber world change. I think probably in the next year or two at the latest, right? So like some elements here are definitely going to change, but I don't think it's going to be like just suddenly replacing the whole right like field as a whole. And I think that's part of why we're seeing that reaction from the red teaming community. Kind of back to your original question, right? Like it's a there's that doubt, the hype cycle, the kind of like just not understanding why people are so blind to the fact that that these tools are not as effective as maybe they might initially appear to be in just completely replacing some of the human operational element to some of these challenges. But as folks have become less naive, right, they've understood the problems better, and some of the more skeptical folks have seen some of the power of some of these tools in particularly limited environments or as an augmentation to their existing expertise. I think that's where we're actually reaching a little bit more of a balance, and what I'm hoping will continue to become a more and more efficient balance as folks actually start to use these tools to be more effective in that environment. To the other point that you made about like why we haven't necessarily included some of those AI for cyber use cases in Atlas, it's deliberately to kind of give us the time and space right now with that community to help characterize a little bit more of what is realistically achievable in that environment. Like I mentioned, we've done quite a bit of internal research on this, especially over the last year, and we've presented some of it at Black Hat. We have quite a few different folks that are engaging across the community to continually make sure that our perspective there is grounded, or our understanding of what's achievable in the applying AI to cyberspace is pretty grounded there. So it's very possible that at some point in the future we'll continue to collaborate with the community to actually characterize what that new AI for cyber threat landscape looks like on top of everything else, right? Like that we're already looking at on the attack side with more focus on traditional cyber threats, and on the Atlas side with kind of that AI, like security of the AI enabled system focus right now. But I think it's going to take a little bit more maturity of the discipline in the field in general before um, we would say like, hey, like here's this huge grounded set of things that you can immediately do with these systems that you need to be thinking about or worried about in your environments today.
Okay, so maybe we're just all sort of figuring it out from a different perspective, and it's taking time to get to that balance and understanding. Um, because yeah, I feel like there's still a couple camps in in the traditional cybersecurity space on the use of AI, and it's like there's still people who are anti AI, and then there's people who I think are using it and just don't talk about it
Yeah.
because they don't because the anti AI people are, I don't know, maybe louder or something. But it's like
Yeah.
it's almost like there's a reluctance to admit, like, yeah, I use it, for this portion of my red team dev or something. Um, it's more popular, I think, to scoff at it right now still. But
Yeah.
I just, to me, it's like, and this is kind of a broader thing. You could say this for red team, you could say this for cybersecurity, you could say it on a national level, where I feel like it's just going to be detrimental if you're not learning about this stuff and figuring out how you can leverage it, just like you would with whatever other tool, right? Like it just, to me, I'm like, it's going to be out there, and if you're not learning about it and learning to leverage it, other people are.
Yeah.
And I do, I think there's advantages to using it. So that means that you're going to be disadvantaged. And again, I think you could apply this to like a national level where it's like, we didn't. And I'm glad we didn't. But for a short time, there was a discussion about, bringing in some really heavy-handed regulation,
Mm.
because of this fear at first, right? Like the first year after ChatGPT came out, it was like it's going to end the world. We have to regulate it really hard and fast, right? But the problem is, you could regulate yourself out of um, being able to take advantage of it in an
Yeah, take
effective way,
advantage.
right? And then, yeah, and then you lose your competitive edge against, your competitors, whether that's other nations or other companies or whatever. So I'm glad we didn't do that, but I feel like we're still in that place in the red team space, and then maybe cybersecurity, where my concern is that we're not focused on it enough in some areas, and that other people are going to figure out how to use it effectively. So, yeah, I'm that's where I'm at. We need to figure out how to leverage it, and not stifle its use or regulate it out of usefulness,
Right.
and then lose our competitive edge.
Yeah.
So,
Or at the very least, kind of understand what it's capable of, right? Like, even if
yeah,
you
at the
don't feel that
least.
it's reached the threshold of confidence from your perspective to be able
Yeah,
to immediately implement in your environment, right? Like, at least understanding what the adversary can effectively do with it is a pretty critical element right now. I mean, I've heard different companies, like different organizations that we collaborate with, even mention like just from like the phishing emails, right? Like just folks being able to create more effective phishing emails, take advantage of more traditional cyber attack pathways, right? Like this is like learn how to create a better password 101 again, right? Like we're kind
yeah,
of going
yeah,
back to the basic cyber hygiene problems here, but it's enough of a like easy, low sophistication, low hanging fruit operational environment. And I mean, like some of the numbers that we've heard from community members is like up to 80 times, not 80%, right? Like 80 times their previous amount of
wow,
sophisticated phishing emails coming into their networks, because like at like 9 months after the release of ChatGPT, just because folks started
yeah,
to see, right, like how effective these tools could be used. And I mean, I think a lot of this ultimately kind of comes back down to the risk posture of defenders versus attackers, right? Like they
yeah,
can try whatever they want to. They don't have like care if it's perfect, right? Like any increase from what their current operational environment looks like is a net positive, right? On the defender's side, it's always a little bit more challenging to kind of have that risk discovery and analysis and management conversation is where we're trying to figure out, okay, is this worth modifying our existing process procedure, right? To get an increase associated with this element of that problem. And in some cases, I think we have seen that value. And I think we have seen more AI for cyber implementation introduced in some particularly like limited environments, right? Like where it is like an augmentation tool or something where you also have a human in the loop making a decision. But I also think that's going to change, especially as these tools become more effective in the coming months and years. It's always going to be a little bit of a challenging environment because the attacker has to be right once, the defender has to be right all of the
all the
time,
time.
and
Yeah,
that's not like right like that's the standard old cyber saying that I just don't think is going to change. That math doesn't change, so our jobs will always be harder on the defender side, and it just kind of means that we kind of have to be on top of both.
yeah. So, with that said, how concerned are you about, or I guess what maybe should the concern be, is a better way to phrase it. But um, I see a lot of discussion about the misuse of commercially available models.
Mhm.
Uh, but it was a short time ago that there was a lot of discussion about the issue of like open source models,
Mhm.
locally run models, right, where they
Yeah.
can't be monitored.
Right.
Um, Obviously, there's hardware constraints on that, maybe not for like nation states, but for smaller threat actor groups, ransomware groups, or something, right? They don't have the resources to have 100,000 specialized GPUs for this
Right.
stuff. But with the resources they can acquire, what is the concern there around, uncontrolled models, basically?
Yeah, I think this all kind of ties back to the supply chain risk component that actually spawned the whole conversation that we started having with one of our community members who originally created the AI risk database and gave it to us, MITRE. about 6 months ago, and why we've been working through actually kind of revamping that into an even bigger collaborative community resource to especially help the community understand those vulnerabilities in some of these public models and data sets, right? So it's kind of inspired by virus total, if you will, right? As one of those kinds
Okay.
of tools that folks are deliberately going to be able to use to just quickly search, like, hey, I'm interested in downloading this model from Hugging Face. Has anybody else reported any problems with it, right?
Mm,
Or has somebody
okay.
scanned this already? Or hopefully, once we continue to integrate even more of the back end tools around that AI risk database, because right now it's a database, right? Like there's not some active scanning capabilities in it, but similar to Virus Total, we're starting to kind of work through the plan with some of our community collaborators to use Dioptra, which is a NIST kind of test platform for AI-enabled systems, if you will, that we develop for NIST. Our MITRE team develops for NIST, and kind of using that, it was open sourced into the community several months ago as part of NIST's executive order response back in July. Kind of using Dioptra as our centerpiece of the open source test platform, that we would then start to integrate other open source tools from across the community to at least develop a low hanging fruit, right? Like quick and easy check, right? For, is there a malicious executable file embedded in this model before I download it, right? The
Sure.
kinds of things that would be helpful, especially for the lower sophistication, like folks that just haven't gotten up to like this level of like peak efficiency on understanding AI security risks. Which, to be honest, is probably a significant number of the community folks that would actually be downloading and using different models from Hugging Face, right? Like they don't
Yeah.
all have a 20-person AI security team that can red team this before they download it or do a threat analysis on it. So even just that kind of like quick and easy, hey, has somebody reported something, or can I quickly scan this with these open source tools to have an idea of whether or not there's something here I need to be worried about? Because yeah, to your point, we have case studies up on the Atlas Matrix right now where folks have downloaded models from Hugging Face, deliberately modified a few of the weights to present modified outputs that could be deliberately targeted at misinformation, disinformation, deliberately kind of messing with performance around certain environments, or even kind of set something up for failure in an adversarial environment. And then just upload that poisoned model back to Hugging Face, and like that's not something that we can even really like say like, oh, Hugging Face, you're not doing your job there, right? Like as you're
Right.
comparing the performance of the original model to the poisoned model, there's no measurable difference, right? Like it just doesn't look any different. So in a lot of scenarios here, unless somebody has like deliberately kind of dug in and understood a little bit more of what might be happening in that scenario, it's pretty hard to actually catch, right? There's not even a detection mechanism for some of these threats in the community already. So just sharing as much knowledge as we can on what some of those vulnerabilities look like, and arming more of the community with as much data as possible is going to ultimately benefit all of us, because we're all kind of in this environment where we have some shared reputational risk and data risk.
Wow. Well, that's awesome that you're creating like a database like that. I feel like I feel like I could keep asking questions and you would keep having, oh yeah, we did this. Oh, we have this. It's over here. You can go use it. So amazing that Mitre's all over it, on top of it, on all these items. So very cool. Really appreciate the work and appreciate you coming to share and talk about it with the community. It's been awesome to have you, and I'm always really enjoy our conversations, Christina. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, Kirk. It's been a blast. And to the community, thank you very much for listening and digging into this topic a little bit more. Like I said before, there are a lot of different places for you to get involved. I mean, I'm even hiring like crazy right now. So if you want to get in the middle of it, like please reach out to me on LinkedIn. I would absolutely love to talk with you more about a lot of the open recs that we have right now. And even just get you a little bit more connected with the broader community. So yeah, thanks all for listening. And thank you very much, Kirk, again for having me on. It's been a blast.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been great. Yeah, I'll drop the references and resources that Christina shared, and pretty cool. I didn't know we were going to find out about job openings. So that's awesome. So if you are interested in the space, definitely go check it out. So thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, Kirk.
To an end, to an end, to an end.